Okay, this is the Wargaming Compendium by Hyde, which I was asked if it was worth buying by my friend Zach White, and I thought rather than sort of writing him a response, I might record something here, which might be more sort of generally useful. The Wargaming Compendium is a fairly hefty hardback. It's seen some hard use. I actually sadly tore the dust jacket there. And it is a very, very substantial piece of work, which weighs in at over 500 pages, and it is an absolutely magisterial tome. The short answer, if you're if you don't want to watch the whole video, is yes, you absolutely should buy this. If you're a wargamer, there is something in here for you. It covers a huge amount of material. It talks about, if we just look at the table of contents here, the basic concepts of wargaming, sort of how the hobby works, history of wargaming, how one might choose a period. This focuses mainly on historical wargaming rather than science fiction and fantasy, although it does sort of touch on those briefly. Building your terrain, collecting your toy soldiers, what sort of toy soldiers you should pick. Shot, Steel and Stone is a black powder era, so that's horse and musket, set of rules, but there are a number of other sets of rules laid out in this book. So this thing is, it's just massive, okay? Some of the older crowd may be familiar with the works of Donald Featherstone. This is certainly comparable. There's lots of these beautiful German flats, for example, and there's Kriegspiel from the Two Fat Lordies, but a really impressive piece of work. And what it essentially is just a massive general guide to the hobby. It is very more focused at the historical end of things. So, which is, Henry is mainly a historical wargamer, and there are lots of beautiful pictures of games in progress in a variety of scales, like these Mexican troops, for example. So this is essentially an introduction, and very much, although there are some references to fantasy, although obviously it mentions sort of Warhammer and the like, but how to create table, and a lot of this is very grounded. How one goes about creating a board, what you can do with, some people use hex setups. This is how you do a hex setup. Here are some things that you can use to create war games, tabletop setups. A tutorial on how to make water courses. This also works for roads, if you're so inclined, and how to do that. So there's a lot of practical modeling advice in here. There is advice on how to paint figures, both metal and plastic. And there's a huge amount to be said for that. It talks about, so there is, let's say, for example, there are a number of rule sets in here. One of them is a Wild West. Look at those Mexican banditos. They're absolutely fantastic. So there is an example of a Wild West shootout game and full set of rules, in which you can put a few cowboys on the table and have a shootout, and that's a full set of rules for that. Some sort of talks about how black powder armies are put together, again with some beautiful illustrations by Marion. I'm not even halfway through this book, and it is absolutely massive. It talks about that. Some general discussions about how those battles were fought. That's black powder battles, for example. Henry is an 18th century aficionado. It also includes a set of rules covering 1685 to 1845, which is coincidentally the same as the old WRG rules. But that is a complete set of rules for black powder battles, so that's sort of Napoleonic. It includes a scenario and a worked example of how and there's just pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of this stuff. It is, so here here is turn 3 of the game that is outlined there. Then there's a discussion of other types of wargaming, such as naval wargaming, space wargaming, air wargaming, role-playing games. Here are some of the Henry likes advanced hero quest. I think that's some of his stuff there. Solo wargaming. There's a discussion of solo wargaming there. There's Henry playing a solo wargame, and some rules that you can use to create your solo wargames, and a sort of general discussion about the internet presence of wargaming in relation to both the publishers, the blogs, all that sort of stuff, and a long list of manufacturers and other people who will sell you all these beautiful toy soldiers and so on. Now, I have, in brief, I recommend this book unreservedly. That I have 2 complaints in relation to it. Firstly, I don't particularly like the sort of shiny paper that it is printed on, but that is merely a matter of taste. The second thing is that it is quite an expensive book because it is just so magisterial in tone. And okay, this is the Wargaming Compendium by Henry. Also, it is a somewhat expensive book, £35. I have seen it advertised, I think, through the Naval and Military Press for somewhat less. Now, I would argue that this book is absolutely worth £35, but the sort of newcomer to the hobby who is likely to gain the most from this book may balk at spending that amount of money on it. I would say that now I have bought multiple copies of this book. This is my own copy. I added 2 copies of this to my old school library, and I'm delighted to report that I bought the second copy after the first copy was stolen. And I can think of no higher praise that or higher compliment that a schoolboy can pay to a book that he considers it worth stealing. So who is this book for? This book is for wargamers. If you're a beginning wargamer, you will find a huge amount of information here that is just of mind-boggling usefulness. Advice on painting, advice on assembling your forces, some rule sets for you to try out, all sorts of things. There's also, I think, a gladiator game in here, which is worth looking at. But if you're a more hardened campaigner, this also has a lot of information that is useful. In that the chapter on the history of wargaming was of no particular interest to me. The section on campaigns was quite good. and I learned quite a bit from that, and found some useful ideas there. Um, who should buy it? I think beginner wargamers should buy it if they have the funds. And if you are an experienced wargamer, perhaps I would very much consider this would be an excellent gift for the aspirant wargamer in your life, the nephew, the godson, the youngster who probably doesn't have the funds to afford a copy themselves, but would benefit greatly from one. So I would suggest, obviously, buy a copy for yourself, but buy a second one and find a youngster to give it to, because that is where the real value lies. It is an excellent book, and I recommend it unreservedly.